Hi everyone, my name's Sarah Davey and I'm Head of Development for Chick, and this is my very first podcast, very excited, and I'm here with Tim West of ARC, Development Director, and Stuart Marshalls from Elements, an MMC provider, and we're going to talk generally about the category definitions of MMC and how they work, basically break them down into more sort of understandable language, to possibly help you guys understand the definitions a bit more clearly than how they're set out by government guidelines at the moment. So just to introduce ourselves, Tim, would you like to make your introduction? Tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Tim West. I'm Development Director at ARC Consultancy. Been there for about 14 months now. Previously worked for a range of local authorities, housing associations and building contractors, and it's been a pleasure to come back and work on client side projects and really enjoyed it so far.
Thanks, Tim. Stuart, will you tell us what you do within Elements and a bit about Elements and what categories Elements use as part of their manufacture?
So I'm Head of UK and Global Sales at Elements. I've been with Elements now about 7 years. Previous to that, I've worked in the offsite industry for going on 20 odd years in different forms of categories. So I've got quite a vast knowledge from 1 to 7 as they go through the process. But Elements, we are heavily focused on being a turnkey contractor and modular manufacturer. Our main focus is on 3D volumetric modular Cat 1, 2D panel systems with our LSF, which is into sort of Cat 2 and 3. And also we have a very successful line in bathroom pods as well, which is a sort of Cat 5 type product for us. And the great thing for us as a business is we can take on projects from a small sort of 5 million, 10 million pound project up to projects over 100 million pounds. So we've got quite a variation in the level of project that we can deliver within the industry as well.
Is there a minimum number of units that you need to deliver? Obviously you're a manufacturer rather than a builder, so in terms of factory space, etc., do you have a minimum?
Yeah, so if I'll kind of park bathroom pods, I think, for this conversation, but for pods, we tend to be about 300 bathroom pods. And I think it's always within the industry, it's a clear definition of how we describe mods and pods. A pod being something like a bathroom or a kitchen, which is non-structural, which tends to go into another structural building. But we'll focus more on the modular side, which for us is a structural element in our 3D volumetric. We typically look to be looking at projects that are around 80 to 100 modules. It tends to be the sort of bottom end of the market for us to give us some sort of throughput. If you can visualise, we work in a 240,000 square foot factory, employ over 300 full-time employees out of there, and we have the capability of manufacturing sort of 20 modules a week from that factory. So somebody giving me 80 or 100 modules is effectively a month, 6 weeks worth of work. So it's a lot of process to put into place, overheads and design work to do to basically churn out something like 80 units. So for us, it works better on larger scale. An ideal project for us is probably nearer 200, 250, but we have got projects and we have looked at smaller projects. So again, it really depends on the complexity of the project, the simplicity of the design, and then from us we can evaluate it in that sort of way.
Okay, and do you cover all sectors, or obviously housing, but do you do other sectors as well? Do you work in other sectors?
Yeah, so for us we do, we're into permanent structure, but the buildings can be made temporary. We don't offer a temporary hire service on it, but we will sell a temporary building if that's required.
So when you say temporary, define what you mean by temporary.
So all our buildings are built to obviously building standards, and we see that as a 60-year lifespan on a building, and we see that as like a permanent building, permanent home. What we've seen more recently, though, is obviously there's two types of temporary building. You have your temporary sort of office type, which we don't tend to do, and then we have the more temporary sort of housing option, which we have the ability to do. But what I would say is that our business isn't focused on the single unit house type, semi-detached, detached sort of housing. We've seen that our market diversified into more apartments, mid-rise, high-rise, and low-rise single unit temporary accommodation is probably where we could head to, but not looking at replacing a sort of traditional built house.
So like the sort of post-war prefabs, that sort of...
I think the challenge we always have is that people have a notion in their head of what that looks like, and prefab's never been a very kind word in the industry here.
They lasted though.
Yes, but the key thing is the word prefabricated is exactly what we do. It's something that is prefabricated, manufactured in another environment and then taken to site. So we deliver prefabricated buildings. I think the key difference between the prefabs that you talked about and now is purely just meeting the building regulations now. And if we're building and designing to client requirements and meeting local authority requirements. So as far as we're concerned, it's a deliverable product that's been designed and specified to meet the needs of the client.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting because I had someone talk to me about MMC the other day, and they said, yes, but MMC, that's not real housing, that's just temporary. So it's an interesting concept. That
we see it as permanent, and I think the key thing to always bear in mind with modular is that we're still using the same materials we're using. In our case, it's a steel frame module. Yes. But other modular companies use timber. We use plasterboard. We put in traditional kitchens. We use traditional glazing. We use traditional roof methods. It's just manufactured in a different environment and then brought to site. And those can be seen as temporary or they can be seen as permanent.
Yes. So Tim, you've got a question. Before we sort of dive into the category definitions, I know you're keen to ask Stuart about, obviously we've seen demise of a number of MNC manufacturers in recent years, and this has caused obviously a bit of concern in the housing sector. So Tim, what's your question for Stuart?
Pretty much that, in fairness. I think you've sort of covered it. I think, in fairness, the modular industry has taken a battering over the past few years. There are confidence issues, certainly within the affordable housing sector, where you have the likes of Ilke going under top hat, leaving some clients with a considerable number of bespoke units, half finished on site. Obviously, Legal and General were a big one as well. And I think people's confidence going forward has taken a knock. How do you see the industry recovering from that? I mean, you possibly tell me that the industry is recovering from that. How's that happening, and how can you restore confidence within a sector that ultimately I think is being seen as being the driver of economic growth over this Parliament?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really valid point that you make, and I know that we as an industry were extremely disappointed when some of the well-known brands out there, the Ilkes and the Top Hats, weren't as successful as we would have liked to have seen them. I think you have to look to wider than those. Those were, although big names, were very niche in what their product was and what they supplied. Where you still see a lot of success within the industry, and there's companies like us who've been going for 20 years and more, there's other companies out there that have diversified. So they do housing, but they also do other forms of modular and offsite, whether that be cabins, whether it be temporary accommodation, whether it be like us. We do a lot of high-rise, we do student accommodation, we do hotels. So we diversified into those markets. That's what makes us attractive as a business, because we don't need to fill a factory just full of houses. We can have a factory that's got a hotel, a student accommodation, and a house that can satisfy our requirements. I think where we've really seen the market is, for me, the challenge was that some of those companies that you mentioned possibly just grew too quickly. They hadn't really even done the concept and sort of delivered and grown. They kind of went from start to sprint and
straight out to the market.
And it was, and I think that was one of the challenges, that they just grew too fast too quickly.
Yeah.
And they were a victim of their own success to that point, because then they needed to fill a factory to keep that beast going. So for us, we've been slow, steady and sure over 20 years, growing our business, and I can name you another half dozen modular companies that have been so successful as well by doing that, and that diversification, but they can still provide the product that you want, but not fully focused on you having to fill that factory to provide that for them as well.
So the diversification is an important part of it. So in a way, it's sort of acting how a traditional contractor would, in that if one market's flying and one market's quiet, you can quite easily switch between the two.
Absolutely.
And keep the cash flow coming through.
Absolutely. And for us, we also provide a full turnkey contractor service. And I think for a client end user, the feedback that we've had is that's something that they want. It's essential that they wrap it all up under one contract, and they don't have a subcontract, main contractor, subcontractor, manufacturer. So having that full delivery mechanism is also something of benefit. The key that you have to, if I put my client's hat on, is obviously they want to make sure that they've got a robust company that they're working with, financially robust.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously, we're now going from maybe something that's a couple of million to something that's £20 million as a delivery product, and so you have to be a little bit more faith in the financial well-being of that company to deliver those. So there's a lot of factors that you have to take on board, and it's like anything, it's finding that right partnership. That not one modular company fits all. You have to look at where the strengths are, where they fit in with your business and what your requirements are, and work with them.
Yes.
I think as well, offering a turnkey service as opposed to just a supply or manufacturer only, because MMC is manufacturing, it's not building, it's not traditional construction, and I think a lot of where you've got sort of a contractor, ground worker and an MMC provider, what's happened in previous schemes that have gone wrong is that the contractor doesn't really understand the MMC provider. You need to understand the business, and so by you guys providing a turnkey service, it's definitely the way forward for MMC to make sure that the site is successful.
And you have a chicken and egg situation where I totally understand that you have a client that comes to you and they say, we've got 4 garage infill sites that we really need you to do. Can you do them? And we say,
no.
It's just not feasible for us. It's just not cost effective. We can't provide that sort of size of project. And so they lose a little bit of faith in what MMC can deliver.
Yeah, I don't think that should be the case. I mean, to be honest, having sat on client side, the honesty should be reassuring. Ultimately, it seems to come back to a lot of the comments that cash is king in many ways. You're looking with the modular product of a lot of cash out from a client's perspective. It's having the confidence to do that. To me, in a funny sort of way, if someone's saying this isn't our bag, but we'll look at this, or this is what we do, that should give confidence in what you're investing in.
Yeah, you're not saying I can do that when,
Yeah.
But there are, garage sites, I love garage sites. And I think there is a place for MMC with garage sites, but maybe not elements because of your business and how you structure it. But the smaller MMC manufacturers, or maybe the different style of MMC category, I think there is. I think it would work well with garage sites.
I think if you standardise the end product, then you'll have more options to you. What we've seen in the past is we've spoken to a number of housing associations, local authorities. They want the product, but they all want their unique version of that one product. And so, it's a bit like going to the car dealership and saying, yeah, I want that car, but I also want a dual steering wheel on it. It's like, but it's just not going to happen.
Or if it does, it's going to cost you.
Yeah, so for us, it's a case of, the best thing the government could ever do is have a standard government layout of a modular home, and then it's up to each manufacturer to provide a cost to build that particular product.
But you're talking internals there, because obviously each planning department across, even neighbouring ones, never mind across the country, will have different expectations of how a unit looks, how it fits in with the street scene. I mean, do you have the flexibility?
100%. And you speak to any modular company, the external facade is only about money.
Yeah.
It's not about what you can put on it. One of our best projects, one of my favourite ever projects, which is up on our website, was one that we did, a student accommodation in Bath. And it looks like a Victorian
I've seen that. It's lovely, isn't it?
building. It's a traditional Bath stone on the outside of it. So the external facade is only about how much you want to pay. Do you want to pay £250 a square foot, or you want to pay square metre, or do you want to pay £500 a square metre?
Yeah.
I think as well, standardisation in terms of Stuart and I sat on a consortium for a few years, and the arguments, no one could agree. There were a number of housing associations, local authorities within this consortium, and as Stuart said, they all wanted a different layout. Some wanted the kitchen at the back, some wanted the kitchen at the front, and I think that's what you're getting at really. You need to agree one floor plan per unit, so 2-bed 4, 3-bed 5, and then everyone rolls that out as a government standard. And that again, standardisation. Yeah. So if an MMC manufacturer does disappear, then another manufacturer can take it on.
Absolutely.
With a little extra cost.
It's a bit like the kitchen. The kitchen. You look at this kitchen in here, and if this room was exactly the same, I don't have a problem swapping out this kitchen on every module that we do to a different colour, different handles, etc. That's not the problem. The problem is when they want the kitchen in a layout, the different side of the room, or there's something else that doesn't quite work, and you have to change it. But for us, it's the continuity piece that really modular companies are looking for to help them just to improve quality, because the more diversification you have, the more that people are having to do things differently every time, and the more risk that you have of poor quality. Whereas if you have that consistency, all you do is you improve the quality day in, day out.
Absolutely. So bringing us on to the category definitions.
Yes.
So 2D, 3D, talk us through them, Stuart, and in sort of plain language.
Yeah.
What is 2D? What is 3D? When I looked at those categories initially, I have no clue what they're talking about. I understand what 2D is, I understand what 3D is, but in MMC terms, I was just, Stuart, help me out, please.
Well, I mean, but the government and I've put together these 7 categories of MMC definitions, and I think it's clear that they all have a varying role to play, and understanding the sort of benefits to I suppose to the client side, which one is the more suitable for them. I mean, if you start with the sort of number one, category 1 is where we heavily focus, which is on 3D primary structural systems. So that is your full volumetric. So effectively, you can take a structural steel element and you create it into a 3D box.
So it's a shoebox.
Basically a shoebox. We don't like to use the word shoebox, obviously. A very expensive shoebox.
For a big pair of shoes, generally.
It helps people understand the concept.
I expect you could probably say it becomes your Lego block.
Right. Okay.
So your category 1 is like your Lego block.
Right.
And you can build multiple units side by side above each other. Our system is designed to go up to sort of 40, 50 story.
Right.
We know that the tallest modular in the UK, I think at the moment, is about 45 story, using a sort of Lego block technology. So that's your Cat 1.
Okay.
Your Cat 2 is your 2D primary structure. So that's more, you see this more in SIPS panels, timber frames.
Okay.
We've seen it more and more now with light gauge steel frames as well, so we can create a panelised system.
So is that frame and panel, or just frame?
So the panels become the frame
Frame,
effectively.
right, okay.
So the easiest way to think about it is it's the walls of your shoebox. So somebody.
Walls of your shoebox, but like before you make it a shoebox.
Yes, and they are structural as well.
Right,
So it's not just a wall. It's got to be a structural component.
Okay.
So that tends to be more on your sort of external side, because internally you'll be some walls that you'll need structurally, but mainly it's focusing on the external wall build-ups.
Okay.
And that, as I say, typically we see that it's been successful it really started in the timber industry, creating 2D timber panels, SIPS panels, etc. And it kind of moved on from that.
Right.
The third definition, category 3, which is pre-manufactured components, are for non-systemised structure, tends to be things like light gauge steel frame or stick build, as people like to call it.
Right. So just explain that a bit further for me.
So again, for the older generation, it's a bit like dealing with Meccano. So everything comes in bits and you kind of pull it together. It can be made into panels, it can be made into things, but effectively you take a wall, and that wall, if you take a light steel gauge or a timber frame, may have 20 studs,
Right.
bits of metal studs to it. And those are assembled effectively on site, individually.
Right.
So you take the individual components to then become your structural component as well.
Okay.
So effectively, the description is usually a stick build more than anything else. So you've gone from a full box to a wall to now stick build.
Okay.
Your category 4 is more about additional manufacturing. So it can be, what can you add into the process? So this is where the 3D printing thing, which the additives and that sort of side of things, which is, it's not something that we're experts in. It's not a field that I personally worked in, but we've seen it more and more becoming relevant with technology, where they are taking components that can be built like printing, laser printing and things as well.
So you know the brick slips that Top Hat developed?
Yes.
Would that?
Yeah, potentially, yeah. So that those can, but what you also get now is we've seen some systems where they actually can 3D print a house.
Wow.
So it's an additive mix that can actually, the machine will actually create the walls, etc. with it as well. So that can be done quite an innovative way. Not many people doing Cat 4 additive manufacturing, not for the structural element, more so for non-structural. So you could be doing internal components and things like that with it as well.
Okay. What sorts of internal components?
So it would vary. I mean, if you look at, again, it could be walls, it could be cabinets, it could be, so there could be elements within that.
Foil wrap doors?
That things like that potentially could be done as well.
Okay.
And then category 5, which is pre-manufactured non-structural assemblies and sub-assemblies. Well, we do that. That's bathroom pods, for instance. People do kitchen pods. We have the capability to do kitchen pods, but we find that market a little bit limited.
Yeah.
The other element that's been quite, I would say, successful in the market is utility pods.
Right.
Those tend to work. Where we're starting to see a little bit of movement in the market, not through Elements but through other companies, is a pod and panel approach to house building. So you could take a 3-bedroom house detached like this, and you could have a 2D wall panel system for the externals, and the category 5 bathroom pod, utility pod, etc. put into it. So
an MMC jigsaw.
And then MMC jigsaw, yeah. So you're utilising quite a lot of different elements within that. And that's something that we've looked at. We've looked at that in the past to see if it was something that would add value. I think that there's still a lot of learning going on with that. We have done it successfully with a light gauge steel frame system in the past for a care home.
Yeah.
That was a number of years ago, and where we used like pod and panel for that. So we know it can be done, but Cat 5 is those sort of sub-assemblies. But I think the easiest thing for people to get their head around is a bathroom pod.
Okay.
Your category 6 is traditional building pods led by site labour reduction. So these are where we're finding ways of doing things better on site. Traditional things like brick slips,
right,
I suppose, would be a good example of something like that. We're seeing some movement within the traditional site build about how facades has got a big impact on that, and I think utilising anything that can speed up the on-site process.
So, pre-cut plasterboard?
Yeah, pre-cut plasterboard, groundworks. There's elements within groundworks that they could be doing, screw piles and elements like that. So anything that would be fairly traditional, but we've made improvements on it, that comes under category 6. And then sort of category 7 is site process-led labour reductions and productivity. So they're trying to look to introduce more sort of robotics and I think we haven't seen much movement in this en masse yet. I think it's basically trying to alleviate any of the work that can be done. So there will be elements on site where we're trying to take away manual labour and see where it can be automated. Now that could even be that on site you were talking about pre-cut plasterboard. Yeah. Could there be something like a little setup where they bring in boards that are cut actually on site in a different way? Tiling, for instance, could there be some way that they can robotically tile a bathroom, for instance? There's certain things that they can do. We see it. This element we see a lot more in the Cat 1 and Cat 2, but in the factories.
Yeah.
We're not seeing it so much on sites yet.
Yeah.
I suppose in the factories you can just do it on a mass-produced unit.
Yeah. Yes.
It might not be there in efficiency purposes, in actually bringing in the robotics into a house, off you go, and so on and so forth. By the time you've done that,
your capex on your actual automation isn't typically manual. But I mean, I have to say I'm no expert on that for a site activity. But that's effectively what Cat 7 is trying to achieve.
So where maybe a housing association or local authority, and they've got a requirement to meet a certain proportion of MMC, they might have some quick wins through number 6 that they don't even realise in some ways. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
And I think the key here is there's no one solution you can mix and match them all, because you can have a Cat 1 with a Cat 6 here, you can have a Cat 2, Cat 3 and a Cat 5 together, and if you're a local authority and you're trying to achieve points to do that, then there's some really quick wins, as you rightly say.
To my mind, Cat 7 is probably the most tricky to achieve.
I think so, yeah. I from my understanding, I don't think there's a requirement to meet all 7. I think it would be impossible to meet all 7. I don't think it's physically possible because they contradict each other. Cat 1 and Cat 2 can to a degree, but I would imagine that if you're at least doing 1 to 3 of them, then it's more than satisfies.
Saying that, you could have a site where you're doing apartments and houses, so you could do apartments in Cat 1 and houses in Cat 2.
Absolutely.
So on sort of bigger sites, then that might work.
Yeah.
It's just Cat 7's the head scratcher for me.
Yes.
The truth is out there. Yeah.
Well, that's been really helpful. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. We are filming in the Chick Show House that is literally being dismantled around us and is going on its final journey up to Yorkshire.
To be lived in.
To be lived in,
yes.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye from us. Thank you so much for listening to our first and hopefully one of many Chick podcasts. And we do hope that you'll tune in to the others as and when they come out. The whole idea of these podcasts is to give you an insight into MMC and its workings, because it is different to normal traditional build. It's a manufacturing process, not a building process. And to hopefully dispel some of the myths surrounding MMC. And this, I do hope you found really helpful. Sadly, not long after filming, Elements Europe followed a few of the other high-profile MMC manufacturers and entered into administration. Stuart Marshall, however, is a very highly respected individual within the sector and comes with a wealth of knowledge, particularly in MMC. He has moved on within the sector and we wish him well, and hopefully our paths will cross again. Our CHIC, our gold standard development framework, offers compliant routes to market for both consultants, contractors and anything regen. For more information, please contact me, Sarah Davey at CHIC. Thank you.